Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us for today's edition to the Canadian Tree Fund webinar series, which aims to bring relevant topics in arboriculture and urban forestry to Canadian arborists. Today's presentation is Canopy for Community, Community and Forests Growing Together. Our presenter is Miranda Burton. Miranda has her master's in climate change and is passionate about climate change adaptation using nature-based solutions. Currently, she is working at Green Venture to inspire community members to build and maintain ecosystems in residential areas through green infrastructure projects like urban forestry and rain gardens. Canadian Tree Fund extends a big thank you to Miranda for joining us here today, and I'll turn it over to you, Miranda, for your presentation.
Great. All right, so hopefully you should see my screen now. Thank you so much, Alex, for the introduction. As mentioned, I am Miranda, and I am the Green Infrastructure Program Manager here at Green Venture. And if you're not familiar with Green Venture, I'll start with a little introduction. So we are a not-for-profit education environmental group here in the city of Hamilton, and we help our community implement greener practices in their homes and communities to hopefully one day make Hamilton a climate champion. And we are based out of Eco House, which is in the east side of Hamilton, and it's an 1850s stone farmhouse that we've retrofitted with a variety of green and sustainable living displays that the community can come visit and learn more how they can implement those types of initiatives in their own home. And of course, we have to acknowledge that Eco House is situated on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Attawadron nations within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. And we at Green Venture acknowledge that we're also part of this agreement and are committed to being stewards of the land. And we further acknowledge that the land is covered between the land's purchase, or between the lake's purchase, of 1792 between the Crown and Mississauga's First Credit First Nation. And also today, the city of Hamilton itself is home to many Indigenous peoples, including the Métis and Inuit from across Turtle Island. And we are committed to reconciliation and protecting the land for those who will inherit it. And we recognize that we must do more to learn about the rich history of the lands, so that we can better understand our roles as residents, neighbors, partners, and caretakers. And I encourage, if you don't know what land you currently are on, to do further research. There's a website called Native Land where you can actually see maps and figure out where exactly you are, as I know we're joining virtually today. All right, so agenda for today, I'm going to go over urban forestry in our community and why it's so important and the benefits it provides for us. And then diving into some local context of Hamilton's urban forestry, so you can learn a little bit more of where Green Venture is coming from. And then diving into our program that we administer as part of our urban forestry education and development, which is Canopy for Community. And then taking a peek at where that program is going and what the future looks like at Green Venture for urban forestry. So first, urban forestry and our community. So as some of you may know, I'm not sure what everyone's backgrounds are, but green space access is has tremendous psychological, social, and economic benefits. And trees in cities provide shade and places for outdoor gathering. They shield us from the sun, wind, dust, and pollution. They reduce air pollution, support energy conservation, increase biodiversity, and improve our water quality and reduce flooding. And unfortunately, there's been a decrease in green space due to urbanization, which has had many negative impacts on our cities. So when we look at that, we can see things like increased air and noise pollution, issues like floods from extreme storm events, increasing in temperature caused by the urban heat island effect, and removal of biodiversity. And trees also play an important role in our lives. So it's important that we increase the awareness of tree benefits by educating the public on the importance of planting trees and caring for those trees in our cities. And urban forestry also benefits our community by improving our mental and physical health. However, unfortunately, we know that trees, and by extension their social, physical and mental health benefits are not equitably distributed across the city, and research has shown that low-income neighborhoods have lower canopy cover. So that's a big part of why we work so hard to ensure that these benefits are equitably distributed across our communities, and we are so passionate about ensuring that those benefits are felt across the city. So to dive more into what Hamilton City looks like and what our urban forestry is doing. So if you're not familiar, again, I'm not sure what everyone's geographically where everyone is. So Hamilton is situated in Southern Ontario, and we have a very unique geography. So that makes for interesting urban forestry dynamics. So located in the Carolinian Forest region, Hamilton has two distinct geographical features that outline the city. There is Lake Ontario on the one side, and then the Niagara Escarpment on the other. And the escarpment kind of delineates what Hamiltonians refer to as the downtown and then Hamilton mountain areas. And so then there are forests and natural areas that span across those areas. And the city is connecting the Hamilton Harbor and the mountain at or through three major corridors that we call Cootes Paradise, the Dundas Valley, and the Red Hill Valley. And so those kind of show you that we've already got maybe some disparities, but also connectivity issues that we need to be aware of, and just can kind of create interesting barriers and interesting challenges for the urban forest. But Hamilton is committed to create a resilient urban forest that helps contribute to the well-being of all its neighborhoods and is valued as a shared asset. So I'm kind of going to go through how that urban forest has developed and grown over the years and where we are now and where we hope to see it. So if we look at kind of where the urban forest was a couple years ago, they started the process of an urban forest strategy, which included a technical review. And with that technical review, they found that the current canopy cover is 21%, which is less or lower than the average municipality in Ontario, and is only 2/3 of their goal of 30%. And the Carolinian Forest region is very diverse. However, unfortunately in Hamilton, species diversity is quite low and can be a challenge, as two of the top 3 species in terms of leaf area in our city are invasive species, Norway maple and Manitoba maple. So we've had a lot of invasive species issues over the years, and over 29% of leaf area in the city is invasive species. So it's something that we need to keep in mind when we are looking to plant new trees and maintain current ones. And then when we look at street trees, which is one of the most valued type of urban forest investment in Hamilton, and it represents 1/4 of the total forest value. Despite stresses like compact soil and road salt and other things like limited growing space, street trees in Hamilton are actually thriving, with 87% in good condition. And then we really need to look into ongoing community engagement, as 60% of trees in the urban forest in Hamilton are on private property. And then diving into kind of what's been going on with the urban forest strategy, there's always room for improvement. So currently the current program is only in the fair performance category. So that's where the strategy will hopefully come in to improve some of those downfalls or some of those issues that they've had in the past. And the first urban forest strategy will be released hopefully in the next couple months, either in December or early next year. And it will be brought to council for review. And that's the first step really towards improving the current state of the forest in Hamilton and what can kind of come next. So like I said, it's under development. It's the first in Hamilton, and it's currently awaiting council review. And so far, it's been composed of the technical report that I mentioned and this draft strategy, which is online, and they've been doing public consultations. And through those public consultations, they've currently provided what the forest values people of our community have in Hamilton. And so some of them, just to highlight, a lot of Hamiltonians believe that the urban forest values include beauty. So having the ability to look at it as local pride, a sense of connection, and also tourism and opportunities. So a lot of people use the escarpment There's a lot of trails and historical sites that people may use that are fairly well forested. Air quality, so hopefully reducing some of the impacts of pollution. Hamilton Harbor also has some steel manufacturing, which can cause issues of pollution, air pollution for the neighboring communities. Stormwater management, we've had a lot of issues because we have combined sewers as well as separated sewer systems. So there's been issues of mitigating flood risk and other damages like pollution into our harbor through Coots Paradise and other areas when we've had some combined sewer overflows fail over the past couple years, more recently in the past couple months. And then climate change, people have said, is a big issue. So looking at the fact that trees do a great job with carbon sequestration. Environmental protection was another value that people highlighted. So looking at the local ecosystem services that urban forests provide and the protection of biodiversity in our cities. And finally, the last value that people highlighted was the mental and well-being that trees provide to our community members. So improve quality of life by providing opportunities to enjoy the outdoors that benefit mental and physical health. And so the future of this urban forest, and where is Hamilton going? So as mentioned, this forest strategy is under development still, but they have come up with a variety of 5 different themes or goals of this strategy. And just going to kind of talk about each and how it connects to Green Venture and how we will be hopefully helping to keep those goals going and help stand them up for the future. So inspiring, so Green Venture, along with other great groups in Hamilton, have been working to support the strategy. We've been sharing the information on our social media accounts. We've been very active in talking about the strategy and improvements and gaps that we'd like to see, and engaging with the community to ensure that they are aware of what's going on so that they can be an active member of this as well. Act is the second theme. So we have been working with the City of Hamilton's forestry section for a long time now, and we're hoping to help continue to implement standardized tree planting details and specifications to ensure longevity of trees that are being planted on city property, and work with the City of Hamilton to ensure equitable distribution of canopy cover across the city, as well as that has come up in their canopy cover reviews. The third one is protect. So Green Venture has been working with the forestry section very closely to ensure that trees that we have planted with them, that they are protected through invasive species removal. So we've been doing events at previous tree plantings to pull out different invasive species, ensuring things like more Manitoba maples or buckthorn, things like that, are not coming back, and to ensure that those newly planted trees have somewhere to grow and thrive. And then the other one is tree conservation bylaws are being recommended in the draft strategy for private trees, as current bylaws unfortunately only cover a few parts of former municipalities that make up the City of Hamilton. So for example, in Ancaster and parts of Dundas, there isn't a bylaw there. And where bylaws do exist, they're not actually effectively implemented. So there's no staff that are working on it. There's low awareness and low to no enforcement. So we're hoping that improves as well through this program. And then growing, so we've been increasing our tree plantings over the past 2 years by teaming up with other groups. So we've been working with a local group called Trees for Hamilton and another group called Can Plant. And we've been planting trees across the Hamilton region. We've engaged with and been promoting Trees Please, which is a program of Environment Hamilton to plant more trees and get trees to residents through giveaways. And we will continue to work with the forestry section to find potential tree planting areas that we can locate for our standard plantings that we do, but also tiny forests, which I'll get into as well. And finally, adapting. So knowing is half the battle of adapting. So Green Venture has launched its first ever tree inventory this past summer, and we hope to continue to provide the City of Hamilton with that data to learn how to adapt to a changing climate, land use, and more. And as mentioned, we aren't the only ones who love trees here in Hamilton. So we've been working with Trees for Hamilton, who's our partner in our Hamilton Tree Equity Project. And this team works with groups to have community members plant trees in their neighborhoods to help grow our urban forest. Can Plant is our partner on our Tiny Forest initiative, and they're based out of Dugan and Associates in Guelph, and that organization has helped us pilot 2 tiny forests in Hamilton. In addition, their team is developing a native plant directory, which you can see on their website. And then again, we are also working with Trees Please where we can, which is a joint venture between Environment Hamilton and Hamilton Naturalist Club. And they work to provide trees for individuals to plant on private property, but also host tree plantings, events, webinars, and do tree inventories as well. All right. So the next part where I'll be diving a little bit more, like I said, into what Green Venture is doing and what our work has been based on over the past 2 years. So Canopy for Community is our main program, and it's about growing the community and forests together. So a little bit of background context before I get into what that exactly entails. Green Venture has multiple programs. We've got an energy program where we do energy audits, and then we also have on winter proofing. We have our green infrastructure programs, which I am the manager of, and we work on different things like stormwater and green infrastructure at-home demonstration projects, but also working on doing community demonstration programs and projects at churches, schools, deep paves, stuff like that. We also have our education programs, so providing virtual and in-person programming for different youth from as young as kindergarten to high school. And then we have our eco-house gardening programs, which looks at things like seed sorting and seed libraries, seedling sales, and working with the public with our community our community gardens as well. And so there have been different intersections, and definitely trees are rooted in our programming at Green Venture, and that just showcases how versatile and critical trees are to sustainability. So with our energy efficiency programs, it's important because trees can lower energy costs for heating and cooling. Stormwater management, we know that trees absorb water from the ground, they preserve soil and prevent or reduce the risk of flooding. Air quality, one of our education programs is called Fresh Air for Kids, and so that's also talking about air pollution, and we know that trees provide oxygen and remove carbon and other pollutants in our air through their leaves. Climate change mitigation, that's kind of intersected through all of our programming, so there's definitely a lot of carbon sequestration and storage that we talk about through those. But the big one is nature connection. So in order for people to care about this stuff, we feel that they need to be connected. So trees support urban biodiversity, and that provides more opportunities and access where children and youth can learn, explore, and gain that appreciation for nature. So it just seemed like after having all those different programs intersect with trees, it just made sense to dedicate an entire program to trees and urban forestry. So Canopy for Community was born out of that. And that was thanks to a Jack Kimmel grant through the Canadian Tree Fund. So thank you so much for that. And that was back in 2019. And we've been delivering the Youth and Trees Growing Together project through that grant, which has kind of been adapted and grown into Canopy for Community to be more of a long-term program that we will continue to host and get funding for different programs within it. And so originally Canopy for Community started as more of this youth program where we would engage students on climate change resiliency through learning about the importance of trees as green infrastructure. We looked at doing things like hands-on events where they could engage with their urban forest through tree identifications, stewardship planning, and tree plantings, and also to allow students to learn about pursuing potentially work in agriculture or forestry and provide them with positive career choices. But the pandemic happened, so we had to adapt just like a forest would and make some changes to that program and started to switch around to more virtual things, but also start to see how this could grow into a bigger program that would last beyond the grant that we were awarded and see other options for us to continue to do urban forest work. So in the past 2 years, we've been doing things kind of in 3 categories. So the first one is learning. So we've been providing a lot of education opportunities around urban forestry. And a lot of that comes from just our main mission. Our mandate has always been education. That is first and foremost what Green Venture does. So we knew the importance of educating the community to bring awareness to urban forests and how they help build support. And that helped to build the support needed to maintain and grow the vital ecosystem of our urban forest. So it's important that we had that connection. So the first one, and you can see in that photo, that's kind of a screenshot of our students doing their stewardship projects. So we launched something called the Youth Stewardship and Professional Skills Program last spring. And this was our main audience. Like, we wanted to do a lot of work with youth. And we worked very close with the school boards to ensure that we could provide some sort of experience that students could do in a safe way. So that's where it kind of came through the virtual learning access instead of doing an in-person one. And so the program was really designed for students to not only learn about urban forestry, but also get some fundamental skills developed and learn how to conduct their own stewardship projects. So each week, the students would learn a little bit about urban forestry, and then they would learn a professional skill like how to brainstorm, conflict resolution, stuff like that. And then they were also learning how they could do a stewardship project as a team. So they divided into 2 teams. The one team took on creating a TikTok account, and on that TikTok account, they did different upcycling projects to bring awareness to litter and single-use plastics. So it was a way to kind of show how we can prevent litter from getting into our urban forest environments and disrupting the natural cycles that way. And then the other group went and did a website filled with different resources like blogs and such that could educate people on what urban forestry is, because it can kind of come across as a foreign word to people. So it was important that we talked about what exactly that was and what it meant. So we worked with those students to provide that website. And overall, it was 14 students that worked on these programs, and we were able to award them 140 or 10 hours each for their efforts to help them build up their community hours, which was very important last year, as a lot of schools were unable to do different programming they would usually normally be able to do to earn those hours. And then the second one, you can see one of our students working on the LDD moth sac removal. So students from a grade 12 class at a school here in Hamilton called Westbound participated in a Canopy for community presentation and stewardship project. So our staff presented to the class about urban forestry and the importance of green infrastructure, the benefits, and then talked about invasive species and the threat that that has on our urban forestry, and particularly looked at LDD moths. And so we reviewed the stewardship projects with the students so they could understand what they were doing. And then we actually went out with them and demonstrated the removal of the invasive species egg sacs, which included how to remove them and then also surveying, so they could learn a little bit of monitoring and surveying skills that way. And they got to actually go to a nearby forest close to their school to do this work. So they got a little bit of in-class and then on hands-on education. And so that was a great group of over 30 students in that school that were able to work on this with us. Plus, we continued to deliver different social media campaigns like Communitree, a month-long celebration of urban forestry. And we also did things like social media posts, contests, videos, and blogs to help educate the public on issues and solutions around trees. Second area that we've been focusing our efforts on with Canopy for Community is growing our urban forest. So we did that through doing kind of providing some empowerment to residents to feel like they could grow the urban forest themselves. So Green Legacy donated acorns to us that we stratified over the winter. And then we created these red oak tree kits. So it included 5 heritage oak seeds or acorns, soil, a growing pot, and then simple step-by-step instructions. And these were distributed to classes, but also community members. And we distributed over 177 acorns to different individuals and families and classrooms as well. And then those who were unable to plant their trees, we originally were going to have a big tree planting at Eco House, but with the different issues, we had to just kind of allow for people to drop them off, and then we planted them. So some people have had their trees planted at Eco House, and other people have just planted their trees in their backyard or front yard or wherever makes sense, maybe even at their schools. And we've been kind of watching those acorns grow through, we had a social media Facebook group where people could post about their acorns and how well they were doing or not so well. And we're excited to kind of see what happens with that, and look forward to seeing how many of these acorns actually end up being planted and end up surviving over this next winter. So we're excited to see how that improves our canopy cover with having some real on the ground grassroots type tree planting. Which leads me to our third and final area of Canopy for Community, which is our planting. So we've really boosted our tree planting over the past 2 years. So we've held a variety of events, planting almost over 1,000 trees in that time. And that's been really great to also see the biodiversity we've been able to do through that. So over 25 different species are not just planting the same trees over and over again, which has been important. And we've also seen over 125 volunteers contributing upwards of 400 volunteer hours to actually get these trees in the ground, which has been great. We've planted a variety, like I said, from red oaks to pawpaws and tulip trees, but we've also planted some shrubs like witch hazel and 9-bark, things like that. And we're so proud of the community that's really come together to plant these trees, and just the amount of excitement that we've seen as people have been able to come up and help grow their urban forest. It's just been really exciting to see how much people really are excited to be a part of that initiative. And then that kind of brings us to the future. So where are we going? We've done this program. We've been doing some evaluation on how well it's been going. But over the past couple months, since about the spring, when we got a couple new grants and new programs, we're really seeing where Canopy for Community, the direction it's going in. So the two major developments that we've had are our tiny forest projects and then our tree equity program. And like I mentioned before, urban development to climate change, our forests are threatened, unfortunately. So we need to protect, maintain, and grow the community, the urban forest canopy, to safeguard a future that is prosperous, healthy, and equitable for generations to come. So we've made adjustments, and these are the two programs that have really stood out to us that are important, that kind of reach those different things, like I said, healthy and equitable forests for all. And so to give you a little more information about what our tiny forests are, so we've been piloting these forests since earlier this fall with a group called CanPlant. So the Miyawaki forest technique, which is named after the Japanese botanist who developed it, is known for dense planting. It's very diverse local native species. There's certain soil preparation and then multi-layered design to mimic the complexity of a native forest. So we've been inspired by this technique to create more densely, as you can see, more densely planted tree plantings opposed to the standard, couple feet between each, kind of in a row. And this technique is new for Hamilton. It's never been done before in our city, but it has been successful before across Japan and other countries for over 40 years. So it's nothing new, but it is new and exciting for us. And the reason why we've gone in the direction of these tiny forests or this Miyawaki inspired method is that they say that it can grow 10 times faster. It really emphasizes the use of native planting, which we've been trying to get the city and other organizations to do more, and that's been really great, and to see the interest and the ability to do that. And also the fact that they take up more carbon, they'd say it's 30% better at carbon sequestration than an ordinary or normal tree planting, of traditional tree planting that, like I said, that you'd see on the streets. And then it's 30% denser. So in these areas, there's only a couple meter, like I think it's in a 1 meter square, there's about 4 plants. So they are quite close to one another. And we used a variety of, different caliper size, but then also shrubs to kind of mimic those layers as mentioned. So far, the one on the, I guess it's my left, but the bigger picture, that one is from October 2nd at Windermere Basin. If you're not familiar with Hamilton area, that's just located off a major highway, the QEW here in Hamilton, near the Red Hill Valley Parkway. And we planted 600 trees and shrubs in that area over that day. And we had an amazing group of about 20 volunteers over that time period that came together throughout the day to help us work on this project. We like to say it was tiny forest, but a big team. And we managed to get all those trees in this area, and then we're going to continue to monitor. So we don't know what it's going to turn out because this area has a variety of different challenges just because of the area that it is. There's not the best soil at first, so we had to do a little bit of amending. Did different things like creating compost, bringing compost in, and providing some root recovery to those plants as well. So we'll be monitoring to see how well it does. Also a little bit of compare and contrast to the other trees that have been planted there, that have been planted in the standardized way. So we'll see how these do and if how they manage in this different more variety planting. And so that was done in partnership with the City of Hamilton's Urban Forest Section and Dugan and Associates Camp Plant. But we also had plants that were subsidized or donated by local nurseries, Origin Native Plants, and Hortico Wholesale Native Plants. So thank you to them. And then the other photo, the smaller picture, that is from Eco House. So more recently, just last week, October 28th, the team at Green Venture, along with volunteers, came together to plant nearly 100 trees and shrubs in that area. And that was part of a smaller Miyawaki Forest at Home demonstration plot that we're piloting. So the plot there will be able to demonstrate to folks who come to visit Eco House if they want to apply the Miyawaki technique to create a microforest in their backyard. We can use this as kind of a demonstration to see how well it does and see if that's something worth pursuing for people at their own homes if they're interested. And as it grows, it's going to be developing and establishing a new forest at Eco House. We've got variety. It's a 2-acre plot of land, and we have a variety of trees that we've done an inventory on, but this will create kind of a new patch that was, there wasn't much there before. So we'll see how it works with their existing forest and if it will just kind of create a bit of an extension of what's already there. And that was thanks to a Clean and Green Neighborhood grant through the city that helped us supply the trees and shrubs to Eco House. And then our other program, which is one of our bigger programs that we just launched in the past year, and that is through a community foundation grant here in the city. So in partnership with City Housing Hamilton, Trees for Hamilton, the City of Hamilton's Forestry Section, as well as the University of Toronto's Daniels Faculty of Architecture, Landscape, and Design, big one. Green Venture has inventoried and mapped tree canopy cover with volunteers from the local community at 20 different city housing properties to determine the best area for tree planting and tree stewardship at those properties. So like I mentioned before, trees are really important to the natural environment, but also vital to our physical and mental health. And so they influence really how we work, live, and play in our communities. And so that's where this grant came from. We came from the vision, or from the area of that the health and benefits and impacts of trees are so important, but they're not equitably distributed across our communities. And this is very rare that it's distributed equally. And so American Forest, if you're familiar with tree equity, has found that tree canopy cover maps often resemble the same map of race and income. And so that shows that just trees are more abundant in higher income neighborhoods and sparse in lower income neighborhoods. and it doesn't matter, regardless of population density, it just seems to be that's a correlation. So that's what we classify as tree inequity or inequality. And their trees and their benefits are necessary for everyone. So, but not everyone has that same access to the benefits. And so we know that these disparities and their impacts are just going to be further exacerbated by climate change, and therefore the urban forest plans and approaches that we implement now really have to strive for a city in which all residents have adequate nature nearby, that have fresh air to breathe, that have ample tree cover, to buffer against heat-related illnesses, because that's the idea. They found in Toronto even they did a study where 911 calls for heat-related illnesses were more abundant in areas where they had lower tree canopy cover, and it just makes sense. If you're also connections to community, they say communities that have more tree coverage, you're more likely to know your neighbors because you're outside a lot more, you're walking out, you're enjoying, you're sitting under a tree in your backyard in the summer. Or even traffic speeds. They say traffic speeds are lower on canopy covered, higher canopy cover streets. So that's also reducing risk of vehicle collisions on your street, and again, impacting health. And so it's really a right and not a privilege to have access to nature. So we want to ensure that it's equitably distributed. And unfortunately in Hamilton, we're not immune to tree inequity. It's very common in our areas. So our urban core and our newer suburban developments likely have lower canopy cover, while the older neighborhoods with larger lot sizes and older trees, or those that, like I said, we have an escarpment adjacent to the escarpment or river valleys, they're going to have higher tree canopy cover. And we just don't have enough mapping at this time of the canopy cover to really understand how tree canopy stacks up across Hamilton and in the rural area versus the urban areas, and across the different neighborhoods, the escarpment above versus below, or different pockets of neighborhoods. And our citywide canopy cover comparison will depend on how you divide up the city. So in the urban forest strategy, their technical report addressed canopy coverage based on city wards, but only certain parts of the ward within the city boundaries. So it kind of shows that there's a variety across our wards, but we don't really know exactly what that means for our neighborhoods. So if we look at, for example, Ward 5, where we find Eco House, there's a 27.4% canopy cover, which is above the 20%. So they would say that it's better in our ward, but we also have big continuous green space. So we've got like the Red Hill Expressway, we've got Lower Batterfield and Lower Stony Creek on the beach strip. Like there's lots of tree coverage. So the neighborhoods might actually be pretty low because those bigger pieces of natural areas are taking up a big chunk of that 27%. So it's something to keep in mind. And also we know that it doesn't really help us create a real map or really doesn't give us enough information to create equity-focused plans and priorities and policies. So we need to kind of find or comb through those areas and figure out where tree plantings make the most sense and where stewardship is best to ensure all residents have access to urban forests and their benefits. So we decided to team up with City Housing Hamilton to look at social housing and kind of create that as our main inventory and create that as our main focus to really look at tree inequity and tree equality in our cities. And so we did a neighbor woods assessment of almost 1,000 trees this past summer at 20 different properties. And that was really helpful. We're doing a report right now on that, on how that's coming to be and what that looks like for the future. And what we can do with that report is then decide what the best plantable areas are, what type of stewardship. It's also given us insight into kind of some of the gaps or issues that we're finding. So just preliminary findings, we're not finished the report yet, but preliminary findings, we're finding that there's a lack of tree species diversity, like I mentioned before, which is very common in Hamilton. You'd think with 1,000 trees, we have a little bit more variety, but unfortunately, only a few species. So we found there's a lot of honey locust, Norway maples, little leaf linden, and Austrian pine. So still some are native, but they're just not diverse enough. So that's something we need to keep in mind in case there are things like any diseases that come in for one of those particular species. So important to keep that in mind. There's also some health challenges that we have found with these trees. So things like weed whacker damage, or that's created trunk damage and scars and rotting. But also some of the trees have been planted too close to sidewalks, which can cause the roots to girdle, unfortunately. And then things like metal and wire stakes that are forgotten and now causing bark damage. So that just gives us kind of some ideas of not just plantable area, you know, what we should be planting, so the diversity of plants or trees, but also some of the health things that maybe we can educate the residents of those properties to become stewards and create tree stewardship teams, or tree care teams that we've been calling them, to go out and kind of, you know, check in on those trees and make sure that they're not being further damaged. So we will continue to share details as we progress through the report and where it ends up, and recommendations hopefully this winter, and then hopefully planning to plant trees in the spring with those residents as well. And as I mentioned, this project is made possible from a Hamilton Community Foundation group grant, which is helping to build a healthy community. So that's kind of where we came at it when we decided to do this project. And that's it. So that kind of gives you you know, a little bit of local context of what Green Venture is working within, and then where we're seeing the future of our program. So thank you so much for listening as we work to protect, maintain, and grow a healthy urban forest and community for all. I just want to shout out to our partners and sponsors. So Canadian Tree Fund for being a main grant provider of the first year or two of Canopy for Community starting. Hamilton Community Foundation for helping fund our projects for tree equity. And then also the partners we've been working for, Trees for Hamilton, as well as continued support from the City of Hamilton's Forestry Section, City Housing Hamilton, and then the University of Toronto and McMaster University. So thank you so much. If there's any questions, I'm happy to stay on and chat. I can go back to anything in the presentation, or yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Miranda. If folks have questions, there's a questions box on your viewing pane there that you can open up and type into, or use the chat, and we'll answer them as we go. Miranda, one question for you: the Milwaukee method for the tree, like the dense tree planting. What kind of diversity did you have in those plantings?
Yeah, so I think for the one at Windermere Basin, it was a minimum of about 30 different species, and then among 600 trees. And then the 100 trees that we had at Green Venture, we were able, because it was only 100, we were able to do a little bit more. So I think that one was of more than 30 at that point. And we tried to make it so that, at least for both of them, no more than like 6 of each seemed to be. So when we looked at Windermere, we had quite a few larger caliper tulip trees, like about 6 or 8 of them. And then some of the smaller ones, like some of the shrubs, we did have maybe upwards of 10, but we tried to really keep it under what the usual. So usually when we do a city tree planting with the forestry section, they may bring, you know, 12 or so species out of 300 trees. So we really did a lot of work to encourage them to bring in a diverse set of trees and shrubs. And then we also complemented that with the donations and subsidies to have that. So I don't have a full plant list in front of me, but I'm always I think it's either going to be on our website or will be in one of our blogs if anyone's interested in kind of seeing what that turned out to be. But it did take a lot of work. I think usually with a Milwaukee forest, there might be, because we just were inspired by it, we didn't do fully exactly what you would normally see. So We kind of worked with what we were able to get, but we did make sure they were all native as well. That was a big piece of it.
Wonderful. One question in the chat here. Would you be able to expand on how you engage the community in your projects, for example, social media, going door to door, etc.?
Yeah, for sure. So we weren't able to actually do a lot of physical stuff other than our tree plantings. But on social media, we have been in the past month or so doing Tree Tuesdays. So every Tuesday we post about that. So if you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Green Venture, we also have a TikTok account that we'll post things on as well, where we've been doing videos about how to properly tree plant and how to identify trees and stuff like that. And then we also have our newsletter where we do a lot of promotion of our blogs and previous social media postings. It has been a little more difficult. We haven't been able to do as much like we would usually be going to festivals and stuff like that. So we haven't had the opportunity to do that as much. We did have a fall festival this past week where our tiny forest was on display so people could ask about it. But we have been definitely leaning more in the virtual world and doing a lot of social media posts, and they've been quite popular. People really gravitate towards, when I look at kind of the data, a lot of people gravitate towards the tree post. So it's definitely getting out there and people are interested and engaged.
Fantastic. It seems to be about it for questions here. So with that, I will thank everyone again for joining us today for the Canadian Tree Fund webinar series. And a big thanks to Miranda for presenting. Before we bid adieu, though, the Canadian Tree Fund invites you to consider donating to our organization to help continue funding arboriculture research and education in Canada. I'm going to post the link in the chat here that goes to our donations page. And that is a place that you can donate where donations of $20 or more are issued a tax receipt. And so for the price of a saw chain, you can help to fund the future arboriculture research in Canada. So the Canadian Tree Fund, for those who are joining us for the first time, a registered charitable organization that was established in 1995, and it's in affiliation with the Ontario chapter of the ISA. And so in tandem with ISAO, the Canadian Tree Fund helps to fund arboriculture and urban forestry research in Canada. And through your donations, you're helping to grow the arboriculture industry of tomorrow. So I want to thank you for your support. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks, Miranda, for presenting, and thanks for the ISAO, as always, for putting this together. Have a good day, folks, and look forward to seeing you next month for our presentation with Sophie Nedlowski. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.